So you are welcome to Psych 121 class. It's about our third or fourth lecture, or Zoom lecture as it were. I'm your host, Dayo Odukoya. Today we'll be going or exploring them. We have already considered the dimension of the gene and the environment, then hormones, gene and behavior, then hormones and human behavior. And this time around, we want to consider environment and human behavior. I'm sure you have heard about the classical controversy called nature-nurture controversy. So having considered the aspect of the gene, then it's also very important we consider the dimension of the environment this time around. And that is what we want to explore now. Now, fundamentally, one of the very first things I wanted to take note of is that the way that you carry out conversation, respond to failure, form relationship with people around you, and generally the way you behave generally, they're in part related to your genetics. For instance, those things have been programmed into your gene. Like a woman naturally caring for a baby. We have some animals that when they give birth to babies, they don't care about the baby, they just leave the baby to fend for itself. But you see, there's something that's been programmed into a woman to have a kind of affection for babies when they're born naturally. So those are part of the genetic tendency. Even lower animals, like if you just observe a chicken, the chicks, for instance, how it takes care of its, you need to, if you look at the lower animals, you just see the way they take care of the younger ones. You just know that it's a product of genetic configuration. You can notice that all around. So it's not something they learn as it were. But when you begin to bring in the factor of learning, that is where the effect of the environment, the stimulus coming from the environment is actually, and you process that over time, that's what brings about learning. So it's a product, learning is more or less a product of the effect of the environment as it were. So you need to understand that there are two major forces shaping your development as it were. What you inherited from your parents and what you are encountering in the environment per second per time. There's some of you who listened to me yesterday on HMD class on this topic, the culture, cognition, and emotion. I'm sure there are some 200 level students. I don't know whether there are some 200 level students in this class who took that course yesterday. It's one area you need to see the effect of the environment, which is the cultural aspect, the culture aspect, how it can shape human behavior. So it's so powerful that if you are born, I don't know whether you've watched this film called Tarzan or so, this boy that was mistakenly left in the forest and then was reared by chimpanzees, who eventually started behaving like chimpanzees and was able even to jump the ropes across the forest all over the place. You may think it's just a kind of fiction, but that is the reality of the power of the environment for you. So your world and life experiences also shape your attitude and your behavior. In fact, there was one particular situation I even observed within some few minutes, how the behavior of a young boy at the embassy was literally changed because he started interacting with a particular child that seems to have been brought up in a very negative environment, and the guy was just not behaving normally. And that other child that was cultured before, within a few minutes started behaving like the guy that was the young chap that was not behaving in a similar fashion. So that's to show you the power of influence of the environment. So you need to be careful where you find yourself, the kind of environment you place yourself. That's part of the background of what we're saying here. Now, the combination of genetics and experiences ultimately from which is the environment we're talking about, ultimately form your identity and influence your behavior. This is foundational and you need to be conscious of this. And part of what we're trying to explore in this particular lecture is the relationship between the environment and human behavior. What is that relationship? Now, environmental psychologists, of course, study this question in particular by seeking to understand how the physical environment affects our behavior and well-being, and how our behavior also affects behavior affects the environment. So it is a vice versa kind of a thing. We affect the environment is also affecting us. Things like pollution and go on, you can see that how we are seriously adversely affecting our environment. The issue of ozone layer, pollution and depletion of ozone layer is a critical example. So it's a vice versa, or in a kind of symbiotic kind of relationship. And in the process, if you're not careful, human beings may end up destroying ourselves if we don't become more disciplined about the way we interact with the environment. And I've given the example of pollution, vis-a-vis the ozone layer, which I'm just talking about now. The greenhouse emission, these are all classical examples of what we're talking about, with the so-called advancement in technology. But because we did not balance up that development properly, and that's what we are beginning to factor in now, we are now beginning to factor in the issue of sustainability in any kind of development we're coming up with. It's not just about coming up with invention. We want to be sure that the invention is not having a kind of side effect that will end up destroying humanity in a matter of few decades to come. And that's what we did not factor in when we allowed refrigerators that are releasing a kind of terrible gases, even automobile, cars and coal, the exhaust over time, now releasing those kind of carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide that would end up depleting the ozone level that is serving as a protective layer of all the very radiation coming from the sun that are adverse, that could adversely affect the health of human beings. And so because we did not factor that in for so many centuries, now it's catching up with us. And you can see the global warming taking place. And imagine, this pathetic picture I'm showing you of this, I think is a panda also, this is the Iceland, the Antarctics, where they normally survive. But because of those global warming, the entire ice is already fast depleting, as it were. And you can imagine what will eventually happen to this poor creature in a matter of few days or months. Where is it going to survive now? It can't even move around again. There's water all over the place. And, movement is highly limited. In fact, it's an endangered species, as it were, all because of the carelessness of the human race, in over the past years, which was born initially out of ignorance, but we're trying to correct that now. But even some leaders are not even saying it, and they're not cooperating, with the trend of development. All they just want is just money. So it's not just about money and invention. We have to be sure that what we're inventing is not ending up destroying the environment, which in turn now begin to destroy human beings. So those are part of the things we need to begin put into consideration when we are consuming them, to show you the power of the environment. You can see so many animals, of course, so many species, including human beings, we have been adversely affected by the nature of what is going on in the environment. And this is a classical example of that we are seeing in this slide, in this picture, as it were. So, and of course, the defrosting of the polar regions, and that is exactly what I've just said. Another dimension, you can see the effect. Life experiences, how do they influence gene expression? And that's the part we want to consider now under obesity. Now, suppose, and I'm going to give you a scenario of two, you can even say let's even say, imagine they're identical twins. Now, suppose Jennifer was raised by wealthy parents who have access to the best and healthiest food. And her parents cook nutritious meals like vegetable and lentil soup, and they limit the amount of sugar in it and salt and fat for their daughter to consume. Now, Jennifer learns to love fruits and vegetables and doesn't crave excessively for salty or sweet food. Just imagine that scenario. Her parents have a significant amount of time to play with her and teach her to live an active lifestyle, so she was able to move out of the house, not just, jump around, go to the field and do a lot of things, ride bicycles, and so on and so forth. And by eating nutritious food and staying physically active, the genes increasing our chances of developing obesity are not expressed, even though she inherited obese genes. That's the scenario we are painting now. We have two children, both of them inherited those obesity genes, but because of the effect of the environment, the kind of food you eat, the kind of exercise you engage in, these are environmental factors now. So because of the interplay of the environment, this lady, she never developed obesity, Jennifer. Now, see another scenario following up of another. Now, Karen also having the same kind of, just assume that they're from the same sort of parents, but brought up in different environments by chance. And Karen now, however, is raised by low-income parents who live in an area where fresh and healthy food is scarce and expensive. Because our parents can afford fruits and vegetables, Karen eats a lot of frozen and packaged meals and fast food, which are higher in sugar, fat, and salt. And of course, our parents both working because they were engaging in so many jobs to make ends meet. So Karen is often left alone in the house and with the solace of television. So she stays stuck on the front of that television for hours on end, not engaging in any physical activity. And Karen's eating and physical activities habits, which are negative as it were, therefore have a way of enhancing the expression of our genes for obesity. She ended up being excessively fat. Now, the bottom line is that both of them started the same way with the same genetic in composition of obesity. But because of the effect of the environment, that gene could not fully express itself in Jennifer, but could find expression in Karen. This actually is a classical example or illustration of the power of the environment. All I've said so far is actually illustrated in this chart. J for Jennifer and K for Karen. And then both identical twins, born with genes that could absorb fats twice as fast as the average person. That's the nature for obesity. So it's not really work. And then at the end of the day, because of the environment, they find themselves, Jennifer eats healthy foods and then was able to engage in physical exercises. Jennifer, at the end of the day, the obesity genes were not triggered to manifest fully. But meanwhile, Karen, because of the environment she found herself, she was eating a lot of unhealthy food full of fats and was not able to engage in exercises. What happened to her? See her becoming obese. So the same starting point, but because of the effect of the environment, the outcomes is coming out different. This is a classical illustration to show the power of the environment, an interplay of the environment and the gene. And I hope, in fact, we can stop at this stage for this class. Once we get this, that actually is the major message of this lecture. This is the major message of this lecture. So we need to, it's not just about the kind of gene you inherited. And that goes for intelligence too. You can apply the same illustration with intelligence. You may have genes that actually make you to be prone to be intelligent. If you are not having the input of, rich environment that is enriched with a lot of useful information, the intelligent gene will not have full expression. And somebody who is not as having a more gene that is endowed with things like you, but with a richer environment, may end up even outperforming you. That is what we're talking about here. So it's a combination, and we need to actually be conscious of this as we proceed. The same thing with stress. How do life experiences influence gene expression? Let's take the area of stress, for instance. Another illustration with stress. Now, I want you to also notice that the environment can also impact how much stress or discomfort people feel. Studies in hospitals have shown that as little as 5 minutes of exposure to nature every day can reduce stress and improve moods. This can be as simple as looking out of a window at the natural setting around you. Even ordinary things like touch, somebody just touching you. I'm not talking of excessive caressing, just touching you or hugging you can make a world of difference in a day. But if for a long time nobody's touching you, you're not even, go sightseeing, you're just locked up in a room somewhere, there's no way you not grow depression, become stressed and then develop depression. So these are part of the discoveries being made in recent times. So we need to be conscious of all this, especially with this lockdown. Then that's why it's been encouraged that we should not just remain locked down. We should not allow ourselves to be locked down in the room because of the so-called regulation of lockdown. At least you should move around, jump around, exercise yourself, play football, shout, make some noise, go outside, just listen to the birds singing and then splash some water on your face and do some things, run around, push yourself around a little bit. And that is how to live. It eliminates stress naturally. Jump on each other. Crack some jokes, roll on the floor, make some noise. It's part of the way to live. It will eliminate stress automatically. And we need to begin to train people around us along the same area. See, as psychologists, don't keep this information to yourself. And I've been telling you, you are not learning this for exam alone. You are learning for life and to be a blessing to people around you. Sincerely speaking, after spirituality psychology, we have so much information to share with people every day. We are not just with keeping this for examination alone. You should be sharing with your loved ones and let them begin to apply some of this information, because so many people are getting into trouble because of lack of knowledge in all these areas I'm sharing with you now. So, can you think of more examples of how the environment can influence the expression of the gene? Now, how does it relate to the concept of epigenetics? You know, epigenetics, as it were, I hope by now you understand it, is how the environment begins to cause a change in the structure of the gene over time. And that's the study of epigenetics. And it's becoming a very powerful area now. So I don't know with time, don't limit yourself to only, because the only specialization most people, in psychology seems to be to know these days is either educational psychology or clinical psychology or school. No, psychology is so wide and it's growing in leaps and bounds. But so many new developments coming up now. You know, genomics is a powerful area, for instance, now. You know, trying to treat and address challenges of health from the gene level. And epigenetics is how the environment is even affecting changes in the gene configuration. So these are areas psychologists, you know, of course, neuropsychology is another very powerful area we should be getting interested in. And so, and vis-a-vis the area of creativity, problem-solving skills, and so on and so forth. So I want you to begin to explore all these areas so that you don't become fixated quickly or engage in premature decision of the area of specialization, because so many new developments are coming up in psychology, and I want you to open up your heart and begin to explore all these avenues. I'm also conscious that I'm talking to people who are not in psychology department per se. So even in your field, there's no way you will not keep on applying this knowledge. That's why actually we are partaking of this course. You know, you keep on, because as long as you are relating with people, like people in sociology, for instance, you keep on relating with people, you keep on seeing all these expressions. So you can now begin to know what is the cause of the reason. What is the reason why this guy is behaving the way he's behaving? You may begin to have a better understanding. Maybe because he was not brought up in the right environment. I used to give the example of people brought up in Ajegule. You can guess the kind of outcome of behavior they're going to exhibit, as it were. Even amongst universities, those who finished from Covenant University and those who finished from that of Lagos and some other public universities like that, the difference will be clear. Even though you don't like the treatment we're taking you through now, the difference is always clear. If you imbibe what we're teaching you here, you stand out clear. We have had testimonies of that severally when they get to the camp, the National Youth Service Corps camp. The difference is always clear. If you can imbibe what we're teaching you, you stand out. People recognize that you are different, positively different for that matter, and they envy you for it. That's the testimony we've been hearing. That's to show you the power of the environment. So let's carefully choose the environment we belong to. And you can have micro environment, the kind of friends you team up with. If you go along with friends that are given to drugs and co, they'll end up polluting you. So you need to carefully choose your environment and make sure you wisely choose your environment so that you can fulfill your destiny. By the mercy of God, you will not miss it. So I'm going to pause here and allow questions and contributions, because I'm done presently with this presentation. If you want to speak, you can unmute and then ask your questions and whatever other information you need for clarification. The floor is open for you.
Sir.
Yes.
Sir, I have a question.
Yes, please go ahead.
So, what is it possible to be in, like, for example, if Jennifer already had the obesity, if she has, like, is it possible to still have it, still have that, like, the
The
gene?
genes for obesity, yeah?
Is it possible for her gene for obesity to still be triggered, even if she's in that kind of environment, the good environment?
Yes, it's still possible. That is, but part of what will trigger that is what I've just explained to you. Like if you allow yourself now to expose yourself to the negative part of the environment, and what are the negative, triggers from the environment? Unhealthy food, not engaging in exercises, sitting down for too long on one spot. Those are part of the environmental factors that
What
can now
um
trigger the
sorry,
manifestation. Yep.
what if she's actually engaging in those activities, but she
Okay.
just has, like, it's just like a natural thing for her to still be obese? Is it still possible?
Yeah, I want to agree that because we have seen cases of, but I think we need to conduct more experiment along this line. This one was actually a product, an outcome of an experiment they've conducted along the line, but we still need to check it more and more to be sure whether it is, because I know some people, despite not eating right, despite eating right, despite still trying to engage in exercises, and they're not eating too much, they still become obese. I know, maybe that's where you are going. I know there is a
Oh,
possibility, but I really think that we need to conduct more researches along this line to further confirm it, because this may be a very spectacular or exceptional case that we are reporting. So I don't want to
oh.
quickly conclude. I still want,
Thank you, sir.
yeah, thank you. Any other observation and contribution?
So I have a question.
Yes, please.
But it's something similar to what the other person just asked.
Okay.
Like, okay, when it comes to was it dominant genes, do
Okay.
you think there's like a lower chance of the environment like suppressing such genes, like due to the fact that they have like a higher tendency to be expressed?
Okay, let me quickly recap on that dominant gene and recessive genes again. The moment the gene is not dominant, which means two dominant genes, actually, the person having two dominant genes, then there's not, maybe you have one recessive gene and one dominant gene. That person will just be a carrier. You are not likely to express that particular trait. But when you have two recessive genes, you go the other way around. Instead of being obese, you become very slim dramatically. But if you now have two dominant genes for obesity, that's when the likelihood of becoming obese is high. But it will still be combined, it will still depend on environmental factor for the full expression of that gene to come out. That's what we have just discussing under this particular lecture now. That's what we're discussing now. But like the last person asked again, there may be exceptional cases to this. There may be exceptions to this. So I still want us to explore. We can read more around researches conducted along this area to see what is the general consensus of finding along this line for those who are interested. Because so many people are having challenges with obesity and they're not necessarily eating excessively. Some of them are even engaging in exercises and yet they're still becoming obese. How can we help them? So these are some of the things we need to explore and check.
Okay, thank you, sir.
You're welcome. So if no other person is having any question, observation again, we can have a closing prayer.